Hello everyone, my name is Florian Isikci. I am a WebXR developer and a co-founder of White Rabbit and one of the co-creators of Construct Arcade. And today I will be talking about my current project, Boulderworld, which is a WebXR climbing experience slash game that you can play right now on Construct Arcade. I won't be going too much into the code as it's not open source, but I'll be talking about how we achieve a lot of the interesting systems within the game. So if you haven't tried out the game, I'll give you a quick overview of how it happens. So you start off the game in this dark room with the logo and press any button prompt, and once you press it, you have this menu in front of you. You can do a lot of things. You have a cursor in your hand. You can select go into a shop. You can, if you've played the game, unlock some points. You can purchase watches. You have a watch in your arm that tells you the real time, and if you're in a level, it tells you the current time you have on the level. And when you start the game, you have the option of selecting between two halls. Here, the big one and the small one. And if you select the level, you can view the level, and if you start it, you get teleported to the wall to start the game. Let's get back to how we do it. The menu, as you saw, has some interesting animations. It's slides back and forth depending on what you do. So if I go back, it fades back in, and so on. And it's all different panels. So how we achieve that is we have a component on each menu item that determines how the buttons are managed, goes through the hierarchy of the menu and adds the right components to it. Basically just standard Wonderland engine things. So for example, this has a collision component, a cursor target, and interacts on button prompt with the script. Yeah. Next thing that I want to talk about is this fading effect within the game. So whenever you do something, there's this fading that moves the player or changes the environment. You get this fading effect, which I think is pretty cool. We achieved that with the help of a fading sphere. So this is basically a sphere, a large sphere that we've imported from Blender, and it has its own material which has its own pipeline. So if we go down to resources and pipelines, we can create new pipelines here by duplicating. And this one in particular is called Fade In. It's a flat alpha masked pipeline that basically just blends the background in and out. And we have a script that basically controls this. The animation as well as this are controlled by a JavaScript library called anime.js. And anime.js does a ton of things. So it can be used to move any element within your browser window, but you can also use it just to change values. And so what I do here is I iterate over a value that is child of the component. In this case, it would be called current fade. And in the update function, I just set the color to current colors alpha specifically to the current fade and set the materials color to that. Once it's complete, I set the animation to null. I'll explain that why in a second. And the only other important thing when using anime.js is that you call the tick function with this specific get time function that gets the time of the application and then, uses that to calculate the animation's current state. Besides of having this interesting fading mechanic, we also have some cool stuff. So we have a ton of levels here, and we manually place the grips in the engine as it's visually a lot easier to review. We also want to have all the grips available at all times, so we don't want to do too much pulling there. How we manage those is we place them in a hierarchy. So we have, for example, handles for levels here that just marks the handle parents, and all the handles for one specific level are just within one parent. So if I were to move this, you would see how this moves. And also all the data for the levels. So each level has specific things like where is the bell going to be, or how is the player going to be positioned when he starts. So we manually move objects to the space, and then we just copy the positions into this level data, and we just load that each time. and that helps our more visual teammates as well, as they will be working mostly in the editor, that they have a structure that they can rely on. So another cool thing we use in Boulderworld is once you complete a level, you have a certain time and you have achieved a certain amount of stars, and that needs to be saved. Obviously, as players, when they come back, they want to have their scores be saved, and they want to maybe have the gear saved. So in order to do that, we have a class called save data, and what that is basically, it's just a JSON structure that is saved as a local storage item. So I would definitely recommend local storage.get item or local.storage.set item, and you can just use that to save any JSON data and then load it on init, and then you will have a save data system. What I would definitely recommend is, though, try versioning your save data, as when you update your program and have more complex data, you will have to check for newer additions and update them as well. So be aware of that. Another interesting thing is, so since we have a gear option here for the store, we need to make sure that all the things that we want to do are referenced in some way. So we have a reference component. I call them just reference holders that just reference images that we're using within our application. So for example, if I were to go to the shop, you will see that we have a ton of images here that just change depending on what the state of the shop is. So we'll have item this, item that, and these also have corresponding models that need to be referenced. They have textures. They might also have additional functionality that we don't know. For example, for the watches, it needs to be marked that they have circular or square shaped UI, so that we can change the menu items depending on what type of watch has been chosen. And that's being done in script, but also by referencing them over on the components. So for materials, we have some for setting gear, and for watches, all that stuff. Another thing, level loading. So how we load the levels and visualize them, that's actually pretty cool. As you can see, we have a ton of grips for each level. So once I click on them, they're displayed in this transparent material that's yellow. But when I open the level, each of them will have the same material each time. So we have to make sure that the materials are cached. So how do we do this? What we do is we just iterate through this list of handles that we have over here, smaller handles, there we go. And then we just iterate through a list of these by sorting them. So each of these obviously have the same materials and the same meshes. So what's important, though, is just to make sure that the orders are the same, because sometimes when you call get component 0 returns this and this or this. It doesn't, you can't be sure that this order is the exact thing you're gonna get. So definitely make sure that when caching stuff like this, you use the same algorithm for every time. That's been working pretty well for us. And for this rail system, we obviously had to do a custom behavior with this rail system component that then disables and enables sets materials for the whole thing in a different manner. But yeah, if you have any questions, feel free to ask me. I am Sryle on the Wonderland Discord. I would love to help. And I've been doing WebXR game development for a couple of years now. It's been so much fun, and I love working on games like this that push the limit of interaction in WebXR. Yeah, thanks for listening. Bye.
We already have some questions here. The first question being by Giorgio Tedesco. Boulderworld, because you're a climber or just for fun?
I'm not a climber personally. I do enjoy climbing, but I don't really do it as a sport recreationally. I just thought it would be an interesting project. As you know, Jonathan already made a tutorial on climbing, so I thought, hey, let me build up on that. And what started off as like a small side project grew up in size and capabilities, and we thought that just climbing works really well in VR, and we just wanted to make a game that is more polished than what we've done before. And we figured out we could make a really solid game design with climbing mechanics. And from what we've created so far, I'm really proud of this game because of how well-rounded it is. Like the menu, the items, they work well together, and we can just build so much more on this game. And we have all these ideas that are coming together. So there's going to be a couple updates coming that are going to really push the boundary of what this game has been so far. So I'm really excited about that. I just like the mechanics. That's where I usually go from. I like the mechanics, and then I build stuff on top of those. Yeah.
Super. One can feel your excitement. That is absolutely amazing. Next question by Kibloy is, for editing the world or menus, do you directly work inside the Wonderland editor, or do you import it from some other software?
Yeah. So the world is mostly created in Blender, so that they're modeled and textured with Blender and Photoshop, and that a 3D artist does it who works with us. Sophia, she's really great. And she also did the design and the logo and things, and she exports those as separate assets onto our Google Drive, which I as a developer then take and integrate into the engine. Sometimes she also integrates 3D assets into the engine herself, but when it comes to doing things like menus that are very programmatically intensive, you need animations, you need clickability, you need interactions, those stuff I usually do myself. I put them together either in Blender or Wonderland. For the menu, it's usually in Blender, because then I can actually like check the proportions and size it a bit and change the UVs if something is wrong, like the fine tech art stuff. And then I import and do everything in Wonderland engine usually, especially when it comes with interacting with script code. I need to have a specific hierarchy that works together with the scripts, so that for example, I change the images of specific buttons or things like that. Those need to be referenced usually.
Yinch asks, what are the limitations of local storage, like maximum limit and persistence?
I could look that up right now. I'm not exactly sure what the limits are, to be honest. I know there are some limitations, but essentially you can take it pretty far. It's basically JSON data, right? You just serialize JSON data and save it, and you can do a lot with it. But what I would definitely not recommend doing is saving long strings in there. Just try to encode your information and keep it short, and have it maybe like, instead of saying saving level names, you are just going to put like indices, obviously. So that makes really sense.
Yeah, amazing. Yeah, I'm actually not familiar with the limitations, but I know that on Safari there's specific limitations, as always.
Yeah, it's going to be different for every browser, I assume, as well. But you can be. I think everyone should try it out and figure it out and tell me one day. I'd like to know myself. Um, but basically, you could technically also use multiple keys in case like you would hit a limit. You would just create a second key, basically like a second set of information that you use as save data. So you would have, for world one, you have the key world one save data, and for world two you would have world two save data, and that would also you could scale on that way instead of on the size of one key.
Okay. Okay, cool. One question from me while chat collects their thoughts. Since you're also a founder of Construct Arcade, how does the goals of Boulderworld play into the goals of Construct Arcade?
So one of the things that we want to make sure is also, when we started Boulderworld, was also to see how could we put in monetization into the game for future developers to actually take as an example or as a motivation to also pursue making games in WebXR that are also financially sustainable. Um, and for that, we thought of selling two things. So one of them is more content. So it would be levels or new gameplays mechanics that would include something like an endless mode, which we are currently working on, or also specific cosmetic items. So we have an update coming soon that it will be selling premium hand gloves, or like a belt that's a bit more unique than just a color change. So things that we've put time and effort in. It's it's rather experimentatious at this point because we don't have it, let's say, on a level where we are 100% sure that it's going to work, but we're trying to push the limits of what has been done before to see, um, if people are actually, how much are people willing to invest? Are people actually willing to invest in a game that has long-term retention and is actually fun to play, and um, has long-term content updates? Because the way we structure the game, it also allows us to iterate on levels quite fast. You just have to, copy a level basically and move all the handles into place, and you have a new level. And
Mhm.
there's nothing that you need to programmatically do basically to create a new level. You could just have a designer there and just use Wonderland engine to place the objects, and it's basically finished. Yeah.
Amazing. Yeah, so you're basically spearheading monetization for all WebXR developers there. An inevitable
Thanks.
question that was from NSTCG. Is there any plan for making Boulderworld multiplayer?
um yes, there are ideas. I wouldn't say plans, but I definitely want to do that because it is kind of a low hanging fruit once there's a stable multiplayer structure supporting it. The Wonderland networking stuff that I wrote sometimes is not super reliable. So that's the biggest hurdle of why I haven't like gone and implemented just a simple multiplayer. Essentially, it is pretty simple because what you're just sending over our position data, and if both players are playing the same game and the positions are synced, so they could just technically just climb around together. But I also want to see a level design that kind of fits the multiplayer aspect. So people maybe helping each other climb, or um, actually solving together some sort of a climbing puzzle, something like that. Just making routes climbable as a race is fun, but I'd want to have something more interesting.
I think that concludes the Q&A. Thank you so much for making it here, despite the trouble of almost not being able to. And
Yes.
thank you so much for taking the time. Thank you for being a great part of the community. And um, I wish you a great rest of your day. Bye, Florian.
Thank you very much for having me. It's really fun to be part of the Wonderland community, and I'm just sorry I missed all the other talks. I saw some of the Q&A that Source Scoots did, and some of his talk, but um, I'm looking forward to having more of these. Thank you, Jonathan, for hosting these.
Well, thank you for the kind words. Bye, Florian.
Bye.